Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a special guest, Dr. Scott Edwards, and he and I actually work together in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'm so excited to bring him onto the podcast because he is leading the way in so many areas of health and aesthetics. He's going to be sharing his story with how he's kind of moved into functional medicine from allopathic medicine. And then we're going to be talking about the role of peptides, and they are up and coming. Most people know about semaglutide with Ozempic and things like that, but there's so much happening. And it's a resource that I don't think a lot of people know of. So I'm really excited to dive into it today. Dr. Scott, thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Marian. It's great to be here.
So tell us your story. You are allopathically trained. You are also a functional medicine doctor. And how did you move towards the functional medicine route? Like, what's your story?
Well, my journey began 25 years ago. After I graduated medical school, I was a surgeon. I was a hand and microsurgeon, a fairly academic one. I was a professor at one of the universities. I ran a fellowship which trained higher level surgeons. I was making a nice career for myself. All along, I have always noticed that there have been deficiencies in Western medicine, how we seem to lose sight of the root cause and how we just kind of miss the mark. We go in with blinders on. And it's always been a sore point with me, but I really didn't know what to do about it. I was fighting the system. And the more I was in the system, the more it became a struggle for me. And so fast forward a few years, my wife, who's a physical therapist, thought it might be a good idea to kind of professionally diversify and, start getting into other things. Maybe aesthetics was an option. And so we looked into that and I took some courses and I became trained and then it occurred to me that, it actually wasn't my idea. I've heard other people talk about this, how it's important to integrate wellness with aesthetics. And the reason being is that if you can optimize how the body is functioning, you can optimize how it will respond to treatments. And so clients will be spending less money, less time, faster healing things, and just better overall outcomes. And so that was always something that intrigued me and thought that would be a great thing to put into my practice. And so, because I am who I am, I just didn't settle with the usual kind of way things are done. And I went the extra mile. I became board certified in functional medicine as well as aesthetics and anti-aging. And I found that that side of it really excited me. And certainly I would integrate things in ways that other places wouldn't or couldn't. But I always went back to the functional medicine side of things and found that to be the most satisfying of services that I offered my clients. As a surgeon or as a aesthetic surgeon, no one ever came up to me and say, "Oh, you saved my marriage." But they do when I hormonally optimize them or get them functioning well or fix their gut or whatever I'm doing. And so that was a very satisfying thing for me. And so that's kind of my journey in a nutshell, where I am today, and with you
Yeah.
as rounding out the side of it that, frankly, you're quite knowledgeable and probably know more than I do about a lot of the nutritional stuff. And I'm happy to have you on the team.
I love being on the team. It's wonderful to partner with a doctor who really values what I can bring to the table and trust that, we both have the patient's well-being at heart and we have the same goal. You are a phenomenal doctor. I've seen amazing results, both aesthetically and on the wellness side. And yeah, changing people's lives for the better, it's incredible. One of the things that I really want to learn more about, and just having a baby and stuff, I haven't been able to do a lot of research. So I'm really excited to learn from you, is about peptides. Obviously, Ozempic is on the scene, and I don't even think people really know what that is, but that's just like one. There are a lot of them out there. I mean, I know that there's some that are specifically targeted for different things like cellular healing and all of these things. And I am wondering what you can teach us about them, because I know that I know that there's a lot there, but maybe we can dig into some of the up and coming ones that are maybe your favorite and give people a place to kind of jumpstart with their research.
I think this is a nice segue from functional medicine to what peptides are, because peptides were never something that was part of my medical training. Certainly I've heard their names, in, learning about the Krebs cycle and learning about cellular processes and things like that. I never knew they were available for clinical use and have been, decades of research behind them. They're not new. They've been around since the 50s,
Wow.
some of these things, and with a lot of literature behind it. And so this was kind of an eye-opening experience to me because I thought what was trendy and fun and, perhaps even gimmicky turned out to be some really good science behind it. And me coming from my academic background, I looked at that pretty heavily. Now, the difference between functional medicine and allopathic medicine is that functional medicine gets to the root causes, and that's where peptides begin. Because, certainly you can think of them of enhancing processes, and you can think of them as maybe helping with certain diseases, but really they get you to a state where, you are not only correcting, but perhaps even preventing problems before they happen. And what are peptides? So peptides are, by simple definition, a chain of amino acids. That's what biology speaking, that's what they are. But in the wellness circles, what we're talking about are usually bioidentical, not always, but usually bioidentical, meaning what we make in our body, substances that do pretty remarkable things. The most well-known one, you keep mentioning semaglutide, but actually insulin is a peptide. And insulin is, something that is a wonderful thing that keeps people alive who are diabetic, who simply can't do a function, which is to drive those glucose into the cells. They need insulin to do that. And so by giving insulin, they stay alive and live a happy life. That's a peptide. Now, there are also probably 3,000 others that do really, really remarkable things like that. One of the ones that we prescribe fairly often are growth hormone secreting peptides. And the reason why I say growth hormone releasing or secreting peptides is that back in the 90s, they used to just administer growth hormone. And this was a great short-term benefit because what's growth hormone? Growth hormone is really the fountain of youth hormone. People talk about testosterone and things like that, but really growth hormone is where it's at if you're trying to get, into that youthful state because everything we think about being youthful is associated with growth hormone to some degree, whether it's more energy or a metabolism that burns fat like you did 20 years ago, or increasing bone density, increasing lean muscle mass, better mood, better sleep, better hair, better skin. These are all growth hormone mediated directly. And unfortunately, you don't have this problem, Marian, but as you get to my age, every decade after age 20, you lose about 30% of your growth hormone. So you get to my age, you don't have a lot, working for you. Now, giving that growth hormone was great short term, but long term was a disaster. A lot of very, very bad complications. Not only insulin resistance, you look bad because you got this visceral fat that gives you that the growth hormone gut, they call it. But worse than that, you get increased IL-1, which led to tumor growth, cancer, and things like that. So that was a very, very bad thing. People are still doing it. They ignore all these things that we've learned back, almost 2 decades, but they're still doing it. But a much safer way to do it is through this peptide that goes in, crosses your blood-brain barrier, and tickles your own pituitary, to secrete your own growth hormone. Unlike testes and ovaries that kind of poop out with time and they're not able to do what they need to do, the pituitary, for a large part, is able to secrete as much growth hormone as it's allowed to, but it just hasn't had the stimulation to do so. So we give it the stimulation to do so in a very physiologic way and the way it likes to do it, and it's very comfortable doing. And because you had the biochemical feedbacks still in place, your body can shut it down at any time if it wants, for whatever reason. So you really can't overdose with it. And it's really it's been a very satisfying thing to have in your wellness strategy going forward as a sustainable kind of solution. And that's probably for our clientele one of the most popular ones that we're giving. But there are a number of others out there, and we can go into all details about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to learn more. It's so interesting to me because you're saying that it's been around for what, 70
Yes.
years, 1950s, and I'm just learning. I didn't actually know insulin was a peptide. You just it's insulin, right? Your pancreas secretes it. It's just the human body is so fascinating, and it's so incredible what we know but don't know, right? Like there's all this information out there. Now, we've had patients find us for particular peptides specifically for like gut health, right? I'm thinking of one in particular that we've helped this year, and she found us because of a certain peptide that was for the gut because she was having major gut issues, right? So, can you tell us maybe about that peptide and how it works?
Well, that's fun. That's a funny story, Marian, because that's an example of people that are getting knowledgeable about what's out there. And it's like they come to us for the peptides, but they stay because of the integration and everything else we do for them. Because, it's just part of human nature, maybe American culture, that everybody's looking for that silver bullet that's going to take care of it, whether it's a pharmaceutical or now whether it's a peptide. But it's really how you integrate it into a comprehensive program that is holistic and really approaches it all ways. And that's how I think you and I are a little different in this regard.
Yeah.
But in any case, you're referring to a peptide called BPC 157, and the name isn't so important, the but again, it's a bioidentical substance that's derived from gastric juices of all places, and it has a very different mechanism. It's nicknamed in the circuits as the Wolverine peptide because it enhances healing, and it does so in three major ways. First, it reduces inflammation significantly. It helps to lay down collagen as part of the healing response, but it also helps to drive angiogenesis, which is the new blood vessel growth into an area where it may be devoid of any kind of vascularity, which of course is the kiss of death for a lot of healing and a lot of disease processes. And so, but it also does a number of other things. It boosts the immune system. It helps lower anxiety. It does a lot of different things. So I find it particularly helpful in recovery from, either whether we're doing an intensive procedure or a surgery. I find it helpful for postoperative complication rehabilitation. If there's a nerve injury, I've had people come to me that have had injuries during surgeries that they've gone months, a nerve problem, for example. And after a month of BP 157, it bounces back. It really is quite amazing how it helps the body regenerate. And we always talk about stem cells and PRP and things like that, and adding growth factors. And this is just another way of doing that helps to work with our body in accelerating healing processes. I've also found it really helpful, Marian, you can appreciate this, in people with autoimmune diseases. So if they have very high inflammatory markers, their immune system's a lot out of whack, this has been very helpful in lowering kind of the noise in their body and letting their body kind of recover a little bit from the constant onslaught of attack that it's been under. So that's been a really
That's
helpful addition.
that's
Yeah.
really cool. A lot of times you hear in the natural world about LDN, low dose naltrexone, which you can't get in the States. You have to order it from another country and bring it in. And that's kind of like a lot of people's go-to for bringing down inflammation. What I like about this particular peptide, again, being bioidentical, is it helps the body help itself, right? And I think that that's really huge. A lot of these other, I mean, all of these different tools in the toolbox are great. PRP is great for certain things, all of that. But I'm always a fan of helping the body help itself. And with our approach, we're very integrative. We're like, okay, you can't be eating crap and also be taking like these peptides or nothing's going to be a magic bullet. Like you have to help it help yourself, right? And I do think that that sets you apart as a clinician, and sets apart our office because we recognize that there is no magic bullet, that everything kind of comes into play together, right? But I know people who are doing all the right things and they cannot get their inflammation down, right? And I know people that are terrible at taking pills, so they might get the low dose naltrexone, LDN, and they have it, but they don't even take it. Where something like IV therapy or injections can be much more beneficial in that way. Have you found that to be true as well?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. And it's maybe more convenient,
Yeah.
but I think definitely. And you mentioned something that I'd love to piggyback on, if I can just do a quick segue.
Yep.
Um,
Go right ahead.
people, stem cells and PRP and all these things are floating around there, and it's just a little bit of, being an academic guy, it's a little bit of a having worked with this stuff and actually done studies on them. It's a little bit of a um, frustrating thing for me because people don't really understand it. And frankly, a lot of the physicians don't really understand it either in my conversations with them. And if I can just kind of give you a 3 minute anecdote on how these things work, everybody that's listening to you is going to understand exactly what these things do and what the limitations are, and they're going to have a background on, deciding what to do when considering these kind of alternatives.
Informed decision is always the way to go.
Yeah. So my analogy that I come up with is that it's a lot like building a house. And of course, it's very oversimplified, but I think it's effective. So the building blocks, the bricks, are the nutritional components that you take in. And you have to be sure that you have the right things there to build the house. That's one thing. And that seems easy. It gets harder though. Now, who's going to take these blocks and build them? You need workers to do that. These are the cells. Okay. Sounds really easy so far. Now, here's where it gets weird. The workers have to have a foreman. The foreman's telling them what to do based on the blueprint. The blueprint's the DNA. The foreman are growth factors. So these are the PRPs. Okay, if you're going to think of it that way, but a number of, thousands of others out there. And if that foreman's not there, those workers are not really going to know what to do, or they're not going to be motivated to do anything because they're probably not going to get paid, or whatever analogy you want to use there. Now, stem cells are the migrant workers. They're the ones coming in off the bus. They don't speak any language. They just were dropped off. You don't know what their background is. They probably don't know what they need to do. And that foreman has to tell those migrant workers what to do. And if there's no foreman there to tell what to do, or the wrong foreman who doesn't speak their language, those migrant workers are just going to sit around and eventually waste away and die because they don't know what to do to help out. When you talk about just injecting stem cells and thinking it's some sort of magic elixir and they're just going to like regenerate things, that's not that simple. You got to have all these things in play to have it work symbiotically. And if you just put PRP in there, that's not going to work unless you have the cells of the migrant workers for them to do something with. So, I mean, that's kind of how it all plays together. Now, it makes a lot of sense to combine the two, provided your PRP or whatever growth factor you're initiating is also communicating with the certain stem cells. And you have everything else in place, and the cells are there, and the nutrition's there, and everything else. But these are the kind of the things that we have to be sure of. And I think once you understand that and how they work together, I think you can kind of understand there's a lot of snake oil out there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. When you don't understand how it works and you don't and I think the other thing that we talked about like with nutrition, I don't think people really understand how much is within their control. Like, all of these different modalities are really helpful, but if you're not taking control of your health and your diet and your lifestyle and you're not laying the foundation for health, then anything that we add to it, it might help a little bit, but it's not going to be able to do the job as efficiently as it could without your help. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. And you can look at it that way and think about, okay, well, you need to hit certain landmarks to get the optimal benefits you can from your food sources that you have or your supplements that you're taking. But also think about the damage we're doing and the holes we're digging by eating the wrong stuff, putting us in a deficit. And you think about the 12 or 13 things that kill you, all but one, except car accidents, are related to inflammation. So it really behooves us to reduce our inflammation as much as possible. And the easiest way right now, or at least the most direct way I can see, is just being careful what we're taking in on a daily basis. I mean, you can
Yeah.
talk about vaccines and radiation and everything else, but I mean, it's the foodstuffs that we're taking in that is really contributing to most of our inflammatory processes on a daily day basis, I think.
Yeah, I always put it as a lot of people are putting apple juice in their gas tank and wondering why their car won't run. When we're eating a lot of like highly processed food, a lot of seed oils, a lot of dairy, a lot of, glyphosate laden wheats and just too much wheat in general. And like and then we're not eating enough protein, we're not eating enough vegetables, we're not eating enough variety. A lot of people eat like the five same things all the time that it really does it just the cells are starved for nutrition, and then then we're on this hunt for the magic pill that's going to help us feel better. You did talk about hormones, and that we do specialize in that. And I kind of want to talk about them because I know that they do play a role in overall health. Also, the peptides can actually help stimulate them, but what happens when the hormones are out of whack? What are people experiencing, and what are some of your favorite ways to help people balance out and kind of feel good again?
Sure. Okay. So this is another departure that makes me frankly angry about my medical education, that I thought hormone replacement therapy was a generic term. And I thought pretty much a progestin was the same thing as progesterone, and they are entirely different. Circling back to me as a third year medical student going through my clinical rotations on OBGYN, a lot of the professors were commenting, it's 25 years ago, that they are thinking about not offering hormone replacement therapy anymore because it's just too risky. And they use the word risky. And then when a doctor uses the word risky, that means it's dangerous. And it was. If you look at the literature, 40 years of literature on it, maybe longer, there are, it's fraught with cancer, heart disease, blood clots, strokes, all these problems with it. And they tried to adjust the doses and mix the different types of it and things like that, but it always had the same outcome. It was risky. And so as a third year medical student, I'm thinking, well, it's a shame because there are a lot of benefits. And I never really figured out why at that time something that was so healthy for people suddenly became toxic at age 50. And I thought, maybe it's the way the species killed itself off, or I don't know, I made up some sort of weird thing. I didn't know any better. It did never occur to me that we're just not giving what is bioidentical. We're not giving the exact molecule that we're actually making. And because of that, there are a lot of side effects. So Premarin, which is the most commonly prescribed estrogen in certainly this country, but I think the world, made by Pfizer, it's a little white little pill. It's a number of oral contraceptives and things like that. Anyway, so that is made from a very natural process, a very natural process made from pregnant horse urine. And because of that, it binds to our human receptors much differently, much stronger. And there are a lot of side effects, these things that I just talked about, blood clots, strokes, breast cancer, uterine cancer. But there is another segment of hormones called bioidentical hormones, which is exactly the molecule that we make. And if you look at the last 35 years of literature on bioidentical hormones, there has not been one reported case along these lines that you see on the FDA labels of these non-bioidentical hormones when given in the proper dosing. So the question is, well, okay, once you've realized this, you look at the literature, you see conflicting reports. This one seems to be great. This one's horrible. Until you realize they're talking about two different hormone pathways or categories, then it all suddenly makes sense. At least it did for me. It was eye-opening and frankly, a little disturbing that I was not introduced to bioidentical hormones. So why wasn't I? So why are these non-bioidentical hormones so popular and still given? And the reason why, Marian, is because you can't patent a bioidentical substance. And if you can't patent a bioidentical substance, you can't make money off it. And if you can't make money off it, drug companies have absolutely no interest in dealing with it. So, in fact, they're going to do whatever they can to make some sort of weird molecule that they can patent, push it on people, say it's the best thing, command medical education and have events and see and tell doctors this is the way it goes. And frankly, we buy it, and that's our thing. The only people making bioidentical hormones are these little compound pharmacies that don't have any marketing campaigns. They're just there to help out the communities. And there's the rub.
Yeah.
And so it's shocking to me that there are legitimate physicians actually saying that we shouldn't be using bioidentical hormones because it's unreliable when that is far from the truth and the literature does not support these comments.
Yeah, what I've heard is that you can't guarantee the dose on bioidentical hormones. So that's what makes them like unsafe, right?
Sure. But okay, well, let's talk about that. So what is more unsafe? A variable hormone that has not shown any of these complications, or one that absolutely has every single dose?
Right.
So I mean that argument's a little weak in itself, but let's talk about the absorption. So that is true because here's a little known fact about bioidentical substances. They don't survive the gut. You can't take a pill of a bioidentical substance. First of all, you can't really store it as a pill, assuming you could, but it can't take it through the gut. It will not survive the stomach acid. It will not survive the liver. And it makes sense because it's something that we make and it's not made to go through this kind of chain. So number one, so you have to take it some other way. Now, one of those other ways are transdermally, through the skin, either an ointment or a patch or a cream or something like that. And that gets messy and you never know how much is going through the skin. You can do it in a sublingual troche, they call it, where it dissolves underneath the tongue, and it gets sent right into the bloodstream with the vasculature underneath the tongue. But again, you're not really knowing how much you're swallowing, how much you're absorbing through that membrane. Again, variable absorption. And so there are injections that you can do, and a lot of the peptides are given by injection, subcutaneous injection, little tiny needle. But a lot of but again, you can get it at a quick state with the injection, but it's going to come down very quickly. And so you're always either having to inject a lot or very frequently, or it's going up and down and you're really not getting at a steady state. The best way I know of for bioidentical, utilization is pelleting. And pellets are like little Tic Tacs that are inserted underneath the skin, and they just slowly dissolve over the next, 4 to 6 months. And you don't have to worry about it. It's going to keep you at a nice steady state, which is what the body likes. You don't have to worry about something to do on a daily basis. It's not messy. It's a procedure that takes about 10 minutes under local anesthesia, but it's something that I found to be extremely helpful. Now, the FDA, you'll hear critics of bioidentical hormones saying, "Oh, the FDA has not cleared bioidentical hormones." That's not true. They have. They have not cleared the pelleting process. That's what they haven't cleared. And that was done intentionally because manufacturers of bioidentical hormones who make pellets and want them given by the pelleting procedure knew that if they go through the regulatory pathways to get FDA clearance on the pelleting procedure, like they did for bioidentical hormones, then the FDA is going to say what should be pelleted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something they wanted to do. So they purposely did not go through those channels. Not that they were rejected, just because they didn't chose not to keep it pure, to keep, big pharma out of it, to keep, it getting corrupted.
Yeah.
I hate to, but that's what happens in medicine a lot of times.
It is unfortunate. And again, it's at the end of the day, it's about making money, not about making people healthy, which I is beyond frustrating. And it's interesting because my experience with hormone replacement was a testosterone cream. And I remember being told, don't do it in the same place for too long or you'll grow a bunch of hair there. And things like that. But what I do know is that, we are in an uphill battle. Like, all the estrogens from birth control are in our water. And so, we're being exposed to hormones that way. And we're being exposed to estrogen like compounds in plastic, like when we ride around in our car with the windows down, windows up when we have that new car smell. That's a bunch of estrogen like chemicals. And so all these things. So we have this, we're running an uphill battle with balanced hormones to begin with. And then, yeah, I've heard how, hormones can be super deadly, increase your risk of breast cancer and all of that. And then bioidentical just makes sense to me. Again, it's about what works best with my body. So, as a practitioner, tying these all together, what is maybe your favorite, what is your preferred approach to helping somebody get healthy and feeling good? Like what's maybe give us a standard case. What it might look like for someone.
That's a great question. And I want to get to that, but I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier about how it's a balancing, how we're kind of held under the thumbs of, other things, and it's a struggle because a couple facts that I just kind of want to throw out to your audience is that there are a lot of lies in medicine. I mean, there are lies about women in particular have been lied to by doctors for centuries. Everything from, oh, your hysteria is because you have a uterus, let's take it out. Or smoking is not dangerous during pregnancy, or there's no G spot. Millions. I mean, I'm being tongue in cheek now, but I mean the whole thing there's a ton of misinformation out there, and because it's got the stamp of medicine on it, oh, it must be dogma. It must be true. I'm not going to question this at all. Well, let's talk about some of the lies that are out there. And I'm going to say lies because there is literature against this, but people are not choosing to listen to it. So I'm going to call it a lie because they choose to put their heads in the sand and stick to the dogma. So here are the facts. Menopausal symptoms are usually not tied to estrogen. And that's the first thing I learned on my OBGYN is when a 50-year-old woman comes in and she's having hot flashes and cranky and weight gain, you give her estrogen and send her on her way. You don't take any labs, you don't even look. And that's how it's done today, a lot of times. But the reality is, like you said, we have a lot of ability to produce estrogen even after the postmenopausal days because number one, your ovaries aren't the only thing that make estrogen. You make it in your adrenal glands, you make it in your subcutaneous tissues, you're still making estrogen to some degree. Number two, you're taking in a lot of substances that help aromatize and make estrogens in your foods, and for better or for worse, it's out there. And you brought up the new car smell. I didn't know that was also doing it there
Yep.
too. That's a new one for me.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so there's that. The reality is only about 30% of American women, and this is different country to country because they're exposed to different things, their diet's different, and their adipose tissue is different, but only 30% of women actually need any estrogen after menopause. I found that shocking. I thought that was the whole reason to give estrogen was menopause, but that was not the case. So the reality is these symptoms that people are having can be better regulated by adjusting either testosterone or progesterone, which is a heck of a lot safer. Because estrogen by itself, if it's not regulated, it can't, bioidentical or not, it has side effects. It can affect the uterus in kind of untoward ways. But also, when I look at, and this kind of moves into your next question. So when I look at somebody, I'm looking at their balance. It's more important to me not where their estrogen is or where their progesterone is. It's more important for me for that woman to be balanced in terms. If their estrogen is high, I want their progesterone high. If their estrogen is low, I want their progesterone low. Because when you get wacky in your symptoms is when the levels get crazy and they get disproportionate of each other. There is a level, however, of testosterone that is very beneficial. And it's very clear that certain disease states are stopped at certain levels, both in men and women.
Oh,
So if guys say, oh, well, I'm hanging around this level. By the way, what's normal? You talk to a doctor, what's a normal level? You look at a lab report, what's normal? It's something like 20 to 300. I mean, it's just like all over the place. And it's not helpful. So I always tell, and I'm sure you do too, I tell my clients and patients that I want them not to be normal for a 55-year-old woman. I want them to be optimal. And so this is what I know based on the literature where I need you to be optimal. And that goes with thyroid, that goes with cortisol, that goes with everything. But the testosterone, it's known that if you have low testosterone in women and men, and I guarantee you, a 40-year-old woman has low testosterone, they're predisposed to early Alzheimer's disease, heart attacks, strokes, and certain cancers. In women, it's breast cancer, and men, it's prostate cancer. But when you correct this with bioidentical testosterone, those risks neutralize to the normal population immediately.
wow.
But when you give non-bioidentical testosterone, you feel better, you got a better libido, you're burning fat, whatever, you get the benefits for those, but those risks still stay high. In fact, there's some evidence to suggest it actually gets worse, particularly prostate cancer and heart disease. So those are the things that we're dealing with. And this, you're going to get and to your point also, that's an uphill battle, you're going to get it from the medical industry, that are brainwashed by pharmaceutical companies, by their own education. And this is getting off the topic a little bit, but the difference between functional medicine and allopathic training, I think, is a matter of critical thinking almost. I mean, you can look at it a lot of different ways. One gets the root cause, one doesn't. One's more scientifically based, one's not. And I see the critics, finger pointing going on both sides, where I think I come from a unique perspective on this. But I do think some of it is critical thinking, where I think a lot of functional medicine providers will ask the questions that now, we learned in COVID that we're not supposed to ask a lot of questions. So we lose our license if we ask questions. And I think a lot of doctors still feel that way. And frankly, the whole medical education is anti-intellectual. You're flooded with a lot of facts that you have to process, memorize, and spit back out, and you don't have time to ask about it.
Yeah.
And frankly, there's not a safe place to even do that. So
I actually have something to say about that because
yeah.
I meet doctors randomly at weddings or events or things. And one of the recurring themes that I find is they know, like, they'll tell me, oh, yeah, I know food works, but nobody will do it. So why bother? Or, and I'm just so offended for their patience. And, or there's just, if you go outside of the pill for an ill or surgery, then it takes the control away from the doctors almost. But then the other thing I find is, like you said, with asking questions, but it's like also being willing to listen and believe the patient. Like, I can't tell you how many of my friends have gone in with hormone related dysfunction. And I know it is when they're telling me what's going on. They go to their doctor and they're giving an antidepressant or an anti anxiety pill. Like, it's
Mm.
all in their head, right? And in the chronic illness world, a lot of it's women that are going, it's like what, 3 to 5 years and 6 to 7 practitioners before they get diagnosed, right? And they all are being given antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds because it's like, well, your labs are fine. So it's all in your head. Here, take this. Right. Like, you're just told that you're crazy. And I almost wonder if it's a lack of control because, like, if you tell them to eat better and exercise, and a lot of times you kind of, I think in the functional medicine world, we kind of work ourselves out of a job almost, because once someone's healthy, they have all the tools that they need. Then we see them less and less. And I mean, in the aesthetics world, we get to see them for more fun things, you know,
I don't know, Marian. I have absolute faith in the American public that they'll continue to make terrible choices.
but like we work ourselves out of job with those patients, and then there's a plethora more. But yes, like, we not only do I think functional medicine ask questions, but we also believe the answers. And I think that that really sets practitioners apart in that. And I feel a lot of allopathically trained doctors are very dismissive. If it doesn't fit inside a box, then it's not a thing. And I think that that's really, really frustrating, especially as we're learning, with our conversation, that there's so many tools at our disposal that are scientifically sound, but they just don't know about them, or, don't have, that's not in their specific body part, so they don't deal with it. I don't know. But I think that that's where things get really frustrating, but also where the functional world is really exciting. Because, like you said, like, yeah, there's all these peptides, which we totally got off topic of peptides, but
Back
yeah, we
to
can get back to it. Just because I think that I know, like, for me, I don't even know where to begin when it comes to research. I don't know what I'm looking for when I'm like, tell me about peptides in Google, like, it just,
Oh my God.
like, even if you're in Google Scholar,
That's
like,
dangerous.
yeah, right? Like, I'm a big fan of researching, and I don't even know, like, when I started to try to research, I didn't even know, like, what questions to ask or where to even begin looking. I do think that we've done a good job of explaining that, like, these different peptides help the body, in its own way heal. So it's really different than the growth hormones that we may have heard about, 20, 30 years ago. But if somebody wants to learn more, where do they even begin to look?
Well, okay, first of all, I think in all fairness, let me back up a little bit because we're banging up on allopathic training and doctors and things like that. And it goes both ways, to be honest, because I am in the catbird seat to see this little battle go back and forth. And yes, you're absolutely right. Functional medicine practitioners will point the fingers at allopathic MDs and say, you got blinders on, you're not holistic, you're not getting to the root cause. And that's true. But on the other side of it, you have the MDs pointing a finger at the functional medicine folks and saying, you guys are not evidence-based. You're just going on whims. You have no evidence, you're not going on good scientific principle. And that's true too. So, it goes both ways, and they're both wrong in their own way, and they're both right in their own way. We just have to kind of bring it together, and that's what I think you and I do a really good job of with that. But as far as if you're just like at home at your computer, I think the worst thing you could do is probably go to Google, especially for this stuff. Now, not for some stuff. Some stuff is great. I mean, that AI stuff really can get down, and then you have to figure out, is it just taking some marketing stuff or not as truth? And that's where marketing and science get blended a little bit. But if you're just looking for a place where you're at least going to get good scientific peer-reviewed survey of things, PubMed is what most physicians use for their scientific research. Now, then again, you have to ask the right questions. And so you may have to play around with it and type in different things and look for what's similar. It does a nice job. It says, well, similar articles to this is this, or other cited referenced articles are here. And that's nice too, because when you have an article, but you want to know where they got their information from, you can look at the cited articles that they're pulling from. And sometimes you just follow a path down a rabbit hole and there's no information. There's just all level 5 anecdotal kind of, expert testimony, and there's no science behind it. And that was interesting as well. I did that one time for a condition as a surgeon, and I followed it all the way down to, why we do things the way we do. And it's how we, prevent things and how everybody just follows this dogma. And I want to find out what's the science behind this. And I followed it down to a 1970 article that basically is just some old surgeon saying, "This is what we ought to do." And that's it, And that was there, and everything was based on that. So it's really kind of a good exercise to just kind of see where the stuff leads you. But I digress. So that's a good place to start. When you Google things, particularly in terms of hormones or peptides, you're going to get a lot of counter marketing claims. You're going to get a lot of misinformation because, frankly, that AI can straighten this stuff out. I don't blame Google. It's just it's just not possible. And so, going back to peptides, I think, there are a couple of other ones that are useful. Now, the first one I talked about, the growth hormone releasing peptide, is it okay if
Yep,
I go back
yep,
to this,
go
Marian?
right.
Okay. I didn't mention a name, and the reason why I didn't is because there are probably about 8 or 10 of them on the market being used today. And I like my ones that I use, and I'll tell you those names. And the reason why I like them is because a lot of the earlier generations had some side effects I didn't like. Either it messed with the cortisol level, or it made you hungry, or it did something along those lines that wasn't really ideal for me. But, the latest generation, I think the most popular one of those right now is a derivative of CJC 1295, either by itself or made into a slightly non-bioidentical form, but I allow it, that has a longer half-life so you don't have to administer it so often. Or my favorite is when it's combined with another one called epimorelin. And there are different pronunciations of that. I'm sure somebody's going to text you and say, he's pronouncing it wrong, but it's tomato, tomato. But the combination of the two give you the greatest spike of growth hormone from your pituitary in the natural way it likes to do it, and then comes back down in a natural way. And and really is a wonderful, and it's probably my favorite of those types. Another peptide that's often used with that healing peptide, the BPC 157, is something called TB 500. And it's a little bit more expensive, but it's often in the studies. Again, if you go to PubMed, you'll see studies on it where they actually use it in combination for orthopedic injuries
Oh.
or post-op surgery.
Hmm.
And sometimes they inject it systemically, sometimes they inject in the joint, and the jury's still out about whether the best method to administer it would be. But it doesn't seem like you can go wrong with either one. And what this does is it works in a slightly different pathway, but accentuate each other. It's like a dynamic duo. It's like Batman and Robin. They work really well together. Good by themselves, but better together. And that's another way to approach it too. There's one that's really exciting that I have to bring up because I think your listeners will like it. It's called epitalon or epithalon, depending on what you're reading. And it's out of Russia from the 1970s. Or actually, I know this goes back to the 50s as well. And this is a peptide that's actually, if you go to PubMed, you're going to see it used in Western literature for oncology cases, cancer cases.
Hmm.
And it's used to slow tumor growth and reduce the chance of metastasis, which is the spread of cancer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And how it works is it activates telomerase, which is an enzyme in every eukaryotic nucleated cell. And telomerase's responsibility is to correct any mutations that happen to the DNA. So if you're exposed to UV light or toxins or just a million cell cycles and one of them goes crazy, the normal path is that, okay, that cell gets weird. The immune system has to identify it and knock it out. And if it doesn't knock it out, it could turn into something bad like cancer. And our immune system's constantly doing this. Well, telomerase is to correct that DNA mutation and make that cell normal again. It's like reversing, you're looking at zombie movies, the
It's
zombie
the
cell.
cure. It makes them human again.
It makes a human again. Right. It's exactly what happens, and it continues into long life. And in the lab, every single cell line that has been exposed to epitelon has showed longevity, has showed increased cell life. And so the idea, although this hasn't been proven in vivo, is that if we can prolong the life of every cell in a healthy way, not in a cancer way, but in a healthy way, then the longevity of that multicellular organism will also increase. And so there are a lot of, studies going on looking at that kind of thing, but it's a little bit hard to prove, as you can
Yeah,
imagine.
you have to wait a
Uh,
really long time to see if it's true or not.
the next question on your mind should be, okay, what kind of crazy side effects does it have? Is it worth it? And again, I can't remember if it was 1970 or 1950 when it first came out. There hasn't been one reported side effect in the protocols given for in humans.
Wow.
That's unusual to say about anything, you know?
Yeah.
There are peptides that can list some side effects on. There's not one with this one. So it doesn't seem to be a lot of downside to it, only upside, and I'm on it. And I wish I knew about it 30 years
Right.
ago. Um, so it's kind of an exciting thing. One other one that's kind of fun is the nootropic peptides. These are the ones that affect the CNS, central nervous system, the brain, spinal cord. So these are the guys that cross the blood-brain barrier and do some things there. And I want to be very careful with these because I don't take these lightly. The only one I recommend and use right now is the oldest of them because it has the most literature on it. It's called CMAX. Again, this came out of Russia, using the Ukraine. Again, decades of literature on it, where some of the newer ones don't, and so I don't trust them quite yet. I want to see how that vets out. But what it does is it was designed to delay the onset of cognitive decline, meaning Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. And in doing so, they also found, and it did that, but it also found it did a number of other things. It seemed to increase memory in people that didn't have a cognitive decline. It also, so that mental fog that people talk about, sometimes that can be quite helpful for that. And also in the younger populations, helps with anxiety and ADHD as well, and
Oh.
even some depressive moods. So it's something that I've been kind of playing with right now as a way of getting people off these, anti-anxiety, antidepressive medications that people are so quick to prescribe nowadays. But they don't want to, they have tons of side effects. They don't want to be on them. I've never met somebody say, "Oh my God, I love my amitriptyline."
Yep. Nope. I've never met. Everybody's like, I'm on it for now and I need to wean off.
Yeah, it's like, and it's almost like a stigma, like I'm on Lexapro, but anyway, so that's a fun one we're playing with as well. So there are a number of them out there. If you almost come in and just tell me what bothers you, so your question before was an excellent one. So give me the scenario how we approach people. So people come in, sometimes they got an agenda, sometimes they're educated, sometimes they're looking for something like our mutual patient one looking for a peptide, and she got much more than that. Um, Sometimes, usually though, I would say usually they're actually just looking for help.
Hmm.
They just say, I just don't feel right. I just am not the person I used to be.
Yeah.
Get a lot of, and it could be the way I look, it could be the way I feel, the way I'm sleeping, how I interact with people. It could be a lot of things. So we have to, like you said before, we have to listen to our patient. We have to find out, we have to get clues on what is it that they want to correct in their life, and then get to the root cause of it, like a functional medicine background will tell us to do. The way I approach things, if it it looks like a skunk and smells like a skunk, it's probably a skunk. So I start first with, provided there's no obvious things going on. They don't have a history of this, a history of that, and past, whatever's. If it's otherwise, somebody that's just kind of going under the radar and nobody's really picking up on it, I tend to think hormones because not many people do a good job looking at
Yeah.
hormones. And so I'm going to run a pretty comprehensive panel looking at all the hormones as a screening tool. I'm going to look at cortisol. Cortisol is the matriarch of all hormones. If that's off, everything's off. Not many people look at that. I'm going to look at all the sex hormones, including prolactin and progesterone. These have to be looked at as well, even in men, particularly prolactin. But I'm also going to look at a couple of other things, but for red flags. I'm going to look down the hormone route, and chances are I'm going to find something there. And to me, that's an easy fix for the most part, except cortisol. That's tough. You know how
Yep.
tough that is. But for a lot of this stuff, I can tweak it here and there, and they can have almost, a relatively immediate result. Within 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, they're going to feel a difference of me messing with that a little bit, either good or bad, and I'm going to know which way it is. But in any case, that's a easy fix. That's something that I can do right away. And chances are I can knock out 60% of their problems with that.
Hmm.
Now, that may not be everything. They may still have fog. They may still have weight issues. They may still have issues like that. And that's where the peptides come in. So then we start, okay, we got you optimized naturally, or relatively naturally, for where you should be as a human being. Now, how do we make you more than optimal?
Yeah.
Super. And that's where the peptides enhance things. They take you beyond physiologic. They take you to another level in a controlled way, in hopefully a natural way, where we can do things we want to do. You mentioned semaglutide. Tirzepatide is another one that is used. We use those. I do not pretend that these are natural ways to lose weight. They are hijacking an endocrine system that was not designed to do that sort of thing, but you can't argue with the results.
Right.
So I will try other ways to get them to lose weight with your help.
Yes.
And if they are, because sometimes genetics work against us, sometimes we're just not able to get to a certain point, and then we can break out the big guns in a controlled way. And I like to, and we talked about not bringing in semaglutide. We talked about not bringing in tirzepatide because we thought it was getting a bad name. It was definitely being abused out there. The marketing makes you sick about it. And so what do you do about that? But, my wife, the owner, Amy, said that we should bring it on because if we don't do it, somebody else will. And at least we know we're going to do it right.
Yep.
And one of the right ways we do it is we combine it with a peptide, one of those growth hormone releasing peptides, because semaglutide, tirzepatide doesn't care what it burns. It burns fat, it burns muscle, and chances are you're going to end up with less lean muscle mass at the end of it than you had beginning. And that's what contributes to that rebound effect where you start eating and boom, it just turns into fat again because your metabolism sucks.
Yeah.
No one ever looked at your thyroid, number one. But your lean muscle mass is gone, you have sarcopenia, and you're going to have this rebound effect. So I like to combine those two to counter, because that growth hormone is going to keep your muscle on,
Yeah.
whereas the tirzepatide, semaglutide want to eat it up. So that when you come off the semaglutide, tirzepatide, which you will come off of, I do not keep people on indefinitely. That is a cop out, and that's going to be shown in the literature that that was a very bad idea, and that's going to be against the standard of care. That's my little prediction in the next 5, 10 years.
Yep.
But and then the peptides are something that you can continue as a sustainable kind of way to keep your metabolism up, keep your lean muscle mass high, keep your energy high so you want to be active.
Yeah. This has been incredibly helpful. I'm really, really glad that we were able to make the time during Christmas to make this happen and to talk about these things because it is so neglected and there are tools out there that can really, really help people where they're at. And the weight issue is a big thing. Like I'm in the middle of that with my thyroid right now. In fact, my lab should be coming out here soon. But, the hormones not being optimal, and then just we talked a little bit about autoimmune and that there's peptides that can help lower inflammation. And it always feels like when it comes to autoimmune disease, you're kind of on like a hamster wheel and you're trying all these things and you're not really getting anywhere. I actually have a specific person in mind that no matter what she does, no matter how clean she eats, she cannot get her inflammation down, like at all. And I know that there's a lot of people in that boat. And so knowing that there are options out there and knowing that there are doctors out there that are knowledgeable on these peptides, I think can inspire a lot of hope. Now, if somebody wanted to work with you, how would they find you?
Oh, well, the easiest way to find us is go right to our website at Natural Radiance Aesthetics and Wellness, and they can either make an appointment or they can call. And we have a wellness consultation that will take about 90 minutes. We go into everything possible, and chances are we're going to uncover some things. And maybe if you got labs, bring them. If not, then we can do the lab work there, or we can work with your insurance company and send it out to SonoraQuest or wherever. We don't make money off the labs. We don't want that being a barrier for people. We don't want the diagnostic tools to get your answers to be a barrier. We want you to have the information so you know what to do with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to have you back for us to dive deeper into the wealth of knowledge that you have.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Marian. And by the way, I think we're going to be opening up telemedicine as well. I know you have a number of
Yay.
listeners in different states all over the country, and so that's something that we're going to be opening up. We just have to figure out the logistics on that.
That is super exciting. Telemedicine, I think COVID really opened a lot of doors for that, where the medical establishment was so resistant. And then when COVID hit, I feel like that's one of the blessings of all of the madness that happened is that telemedicine has been able to expand. So I can't wait. That's gonna help a lot.
Yeah, we're in Scottsdale, but we're going nationwide.
Yay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivingwhole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivingwhole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.